My customer's used up 12-inch carcass saw needs a new lease on life, and he's asked me to replace the plate. We'll start by taking the saw apart, wipe down the handle, clean the fasteners, and we'll squirt some WD-40 into the aperture of the traditional folded saw back and let that loosen up before we remove it. All right, now it's time to lift this saw back. Traditional folded saw back. We let that penetrating oil do its thing, and we broke the seal, and here we go. Back's coming off quite nicely. Just peel it right off there in line with the spine, and there we go. There's the saw back. Next, we'll mark the new plate where it needs to be cut off, shear the cut off piece and the upper notch where it goes into the handle. Then we'll take it to the grinder and deburr all the edges. Now I'll take the new plate to my retoother and establish a 13 ppi tooth line. Now that I have established the tooth line, I'm going to mark every other tooth on both sides of the plate to serve as a visual cue, and then take it to my Acme saw filer where I will refine the geometry of the tooth line for hybrid cut. And I'm doing that at 10 degrees bevel and 10 degrees rake. After dialing in the geometry, it's time to set the tooth line. And you see me using the Bad Axe hammer set, which is patterned quite closely after the Seymour Smith hammer set from the 1870s. I love this set. This thing works like a charm. The hammer set's elevator set screw allows me to dial in precisely the amount of set that I want before I sharpen and stone the plate. In this case, I'm seeking 0.036. I'm going to lose a thou during the sharpening process and another thou when I stone the plate for an optimized combined set of 0.034 for this 0.025 plate. Once I have the set established, I'll mount the plate into my Acme saw vise and joint it and then proceed with finished sharpening. Note that I'm using a 200 millimeter needle file, which is slightly undersized for this tooth count of 13 ppi, but my intention is to deepen the gullets and elongate the cutting edge of the teeth. Time to reassemble the saw. I will mount the plate into my vise, smear some canning wax along the spine, and then tap on the traditional folded saw back onto about 3/16 of an inch into the top of the spine. Fun fact, you know how your handles get loose during wintertime and the cold air just dries them out? You get that clicking sensation with your saw handle? Just mount your plate and mount the saw in a vise like this and tap the toe end of the saw back, and it will close up that little air gap that's developed between the back wall of your handle mortise and that receives the saw back and plate assembly. It'll close it up, tighten it up, no more clicking handle. Time to drill on the handle. I will mount it onto the plate and back assembly and drill it using a tungsten carbide drill, using the handle fastener holes as a template to cut through this hardened spring steel plate. We're almost done. Let's screw that handle back on and check out the new plate. Looking good. And it's always a moment of great anticipation because now it's time to see how this bad boy cuts. At this point, I'll generally make a test cut before stoning the tooth line just to get a sense as to how well I've sharpened the saw and to fix any hiccups before stoning. Why do I stone the tooth line? Because saw filing raises burrs on the far side of the tooth. It's important to remove those burrs to truly assess whether you've hit your desired set strength for the gauge of metal you're working with. You can see on my Sawfiler's reference chart where I've developed set strength standards for common Sawplate gauges that my team at Bad Axe and I collected on over 20,000 saws we produced over a 13-year period. Let's challenge the test cut with some 6/4 thick by 2.5 inch wide white oak. It starts cleanly on the push stroke at the beginning of the cut. It tracks evenly, drift-free. The action is superb, and it is a noticeable difference after you stone. 28 strokes later, we have completed the cut on this 6/4 white oak. And a very clean finish on the end grain. Now let's see how it performs in rip mode. 2 3/8 inches, we're going 1.5 inches down. Let's see what we can do. All right, that was 34 strokes. And there you have it. 10 degrees bevel, 10 degrees rake, hybrid filed. White oak, 2 3/8 of an inch, 1.5 inches down. And there you have it for saw plate replacement. We've lifted off the back, cut a new plate and toothed it, shaped, set, and sharpened the tooth line at 13 PPI hybrid, put the saw back together and ran it through its paces on some white oak. Hope this video has inspired you to breathe new life into one of your favorite vintage saws. This has been Mark at SawSharp. Thanks for watching.